What if I told you that the people who praise your character the most eloquently might be the ones studying you most carefully for future betrayal? It sounds paradoxical, doesn't it? We've been conditioned to believe that workplace environments are built on mutual respect and professional courtesy. But the harsh reality is that some of the most devastating betrayals happen not from obvious enemies, but from those who gain our trust through seemingly genuine appreciation and connection. The doorman had built his reputation on quiet acts of service, understanding that trust in a professional environment isn't built through grand gestures, but through consistent reliability. Every morning he'd greet residents with genuine warmth, remembering their names, their routines, their small struggles. His loyalty to the building wasn't just a job requirement, it was a personal code that defined who he was. When he saw the elderly woman struggling with her grocery bags at the building entrance, his instinct to help wasn't calculated or strategic. The frustration he felt watching someone struggle while he had the power to ease their burden was immediate and genuine. This moment would become the catalyst for a series of events that would test everything he believed about human nature and workplace dynamics. The woman's genuine gratitude touched something deep within him, reminding him why he'd chosen this profession in the first place. Her daughter appeared shortly after, her eyes bright with appreciation as she thanked him for his kindness toward her mother. "She hasn't stopped talking about you," the young woman said, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed to acknowledge the rarity of such selfless behavior. The doorman felt a quiet satisfaction, not from recognition, but from knowing he'd made a difference in someone's day. This interaction reinforced his belief that professional environments thrive when built on mutual respect and genuine care. The trust he'd established with residents over years of dedicated service felt more solid than ever. Little did he know that this moment of pure intention would soon be twisted into something that would challenge his faith in human decency. In the days that followed, the daughter began making more frequent appearances in the lobby, each visit extending longer than necessary. Her conversations shifted from grateful acknowledgments to personal inquiries, probing into his background, his dreams, his perspective on life. She spoke of his rare heart with such conviction that he began to believe maybe his approach to work, treating every interaction as an opportunity to serve, was indeed special. The professional environment of the building lobby became charged with a different energy, one that blurred the lines between workplace courtesy and personal connection. Yet something in her manner, a calculated quality beneath the praise, should have triggered his instincts. The very qualities that made him excellent at his job, his trusting nature and willingness to see the best in people, were about to become his greatest vulnerability in this unfolding story of deception. But what happened next would reveal the true nature of workplace betrayal, and how quickly admiration can transform into something far more sinister. On the third day, as their conversation flowed in the familiar space of the lobby, an unexpected visitor would arrive to shatter the illusion he'd unknowingly been living. The trust he'd built, not just with her but with his own judgment, was about to face its most devastating test. This moment would become a masterclass in how betrayal operates in professional settings, not through obvious acts of sabotage, but through the weaponization of vulnerability and the cruel mockery of genuine character. The lessons embedded in what was about to unfold would reshape his understanding of loyalty, professional boundaries, and the true cost of placing trust in the wrong people. The friend's arrival seemed innocent enough, just another resident passing through the lobby during their conversation. But the casual cruelty that followed, the daughter's laughter at the joke about his financial status, her easy agreement that he was sweet but broke, cut deeper than any professional criticism ever could. The betrayal wasn't just in her words, but in how effortlessly she shifted from private praise to public ridicule. In that moment, he understood a fundamental truth about workplace dynamics. People will test your character when they think you're not watching, and their true feelings emerge when they believe there are no consequences. The frustration he felt wasn't just personal. It was the recognition that his years of building trust and demonstrating loyalty had been reduced to entertainment for someone who saw his dedication as weakness rather than strength. His response became a defining moment in professional dignity, choosing silence over confrontation, action over argument. When she later attempted to dismiss her cruelty as mere joking, His reply carried the weight of someone who'd learned a profound lesson about self-respect in professional environments. Helping your mother was a choice. Hearing that wasn't, he said, establishing a boundary that would reshape how others perceived him. The story spread throughout the building, but instead of damaging his reputation, it elevated it. Residents began to see him not just as helpful staff, but as someone with uncompromising standards for how he expected to be treated. This transformation from betrayed employee to respected professional became a template for others facing similar situations. Months later, his elevation to building manager and the success of his own maintenance company proved that overcoming workplace betrayal isn't about revenge. It's about building something better. When she eventually sought his services and he responded with professional rates for everything, including dignity restoration, he demonstrated the ultimate form of professional growth. The lesson here transcends individual hurt. In professional environments, your response to betrayal defines your future more than the betrayal itself. His journey from doorman to business owner, fueled by the clarity that comes from understanding your true worth, shows how disappointment can become the foundation for unprecedented success. The trust he now commanded wasn't given carelessly, but earned through demonstrated character and professional excellence that no one could dismiss or mock. When praise arrives unexpectedly in a professional environment, it carries a weight that can either elevate or deceive, depending on the intentions behind it. The young woman's words seemed to validate everything he believed about genuine service. That kindness creates ripples far beyond the initial act. Her mother's enchantment wasn't just with his helpfulness, but with the rarity of encountering someone who acted without expecting anything in return. In workplace settings, this type of recognition feels precious because it's so uncommon. Most professional interactions are transactional, measured, calculated for mutual benefit. The trust he'd built through consistent behavior was now being acknowledged not just by the recipient, but by someone who had witnessed its impact secondhand. This validation felt like confirmation that his approach to work, treating every interaction as an opportunity to demonstrate integrity, was not only right, but remarkable. The professional environment suddenly felt charged with possibility, as if his dedication had opened doors he never knew existed. The daughter's delivery of this message carried an intimacy that transformed their dynamic from resident staff to something more personal and complex. She spoke with the authority of someone conveying important news, her eyes bright with what seemed like genuine admiration for his character. Her emphasis on "never met a man like that" suggested he occupied a unique space in their experience, someone whose loyalty and genuine care stood out against a backdrop of disappointing encounters. The frustration many people feel with superficial professional interactions seemed absent from her mother's response to him. Instead, there was recognition of something authentic, something that couldn't be faked or performed. This moment felt like professional validation at its purest, appreciation for character rather than just competence. Yet beneath this seemingly innocent praise lay the first threads of manipulation, though he wouldn't recognize them until much later. Her manner of sharing this information revealed sophisticated emotional intelligence, understanding exactly how to make him feel special without being obvious about it. The professional boundary between them began to blur as she positioned herself as the messenger of his worthiness, creating a dynamic where she held the power to validate or withhold recognition. She painted a picture of her mother's genuine amazement, describing conversations where his name came up repeatedly, always with wonder at encountering such rare character. The disappointment her mother had apparently felt with other men made his simple act of helping seem even more significant. This narrative elevated him from helpful employee to someone exceptional, someone worth talking about, someone who had made a lasting impression. The trust he'd earned was being reflected back to him through her words, creating a feedback loop that felt both professionally satisfying and personally meaningful. But what he didn't realize was how masterfully she was setting the stage for deeper manipulation, using her mother's genuine appreciation as a weapon to lower his defenses. The way she lingered over certain phrases, the careful emphasis on his uniqueness, the subtle suggestion that such character was virtually impossible to find, all of this was designed to make him feel both special and isolated. She was creating a scenario where he would become emotionally invested in maintaining this elevated status, where disappointing her would feel like betraying the trust of someone who truly saw his worth. The professional environment that had always felt safe and predictable was being transformed into something more complex and dangerous. Her strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Use genuine praise to create emotional dependency, then exploit that dependency when it served her purposes. The emotional impact of hearing that someone had been enchanted by his character created a vulnerability he'd never experienced in his professional life. For someone who took pride in his work but rarely received such personal recognition, these words felt like a gift. Validation that his approach to service wasn't just effective, but deeply meaningful to those he served. The trust he'd built through consistent action was now being celebrated in ways that made his heart swell with professional pride. She seemed to understand the power of this moment, delivering the praise with just the right amount of reverence to make it feel genuine and significant. The super assault he would eventually need to achieve would begin with recognizing how this seemingly innocent moment had opened the door to manipulation. The aprendizado embedded in this experience would teach him that praise, however genuine it seems, can be weaponized by those who understand human psychology. Her positioning as the conduit for her mother's appreciation gave her access to his emotional world in ways that felt natural and welcome. She wasn't just delivering good news, she was establishing herself as someone who recognized and celebrated his worth when others might overlook it. The professional setting, that had always been about service to others, suddenly included someone who seemed invested in serving his need for recognition and validation. This shift created a dangerous dynamic where his guard dropped because the interaction felt like reward rather than risk. The loyalty he'd always directed outward, toward residents, toward his job, toward maintaining trust, was now being courted and cultivated by someone who seemed to appreciate its rarity. Little did he know that this appreciation was performative, designed to gain access to the very qualities that made him trustworthy and reliable. The seeds of betrayal were planted in this moment of apparent validation, growing in the fertile ground of his genuine desire to be appreciated for his character rather than just his services. She had identified his core strength, his authentic care for others, and was positioning herself to exploit it through careful manipulation of his need for recognition. The frustration and deception that would follow were made possible by this carefully orchestrated elevation of his ego and emotions. When the inevitable betrayal came, it would hurt more deeply because she had made him believe that someone truly saw and valued his authentic self. This experience would become a masterclass in how workplace manipulation often begins not with cruelty, but with seemingly genuine appreciation that creates emotional investment and vulnerability in the target. The frequency of her visits created a new rhythm in his professional routine, transforming ordinary workdays into something he began to anticipate with quiet excitement. What had started as occasional encounters evolved into a pattern that felt both natural and special. She would appear in the lobby at different times, always with a reason that seemed legitimate, but lingered longer than necessary. Her praise of his rare heart became a recurring theme, delivered with variations that kept it feeling fresh and genuine rather than repetitive or calculated. The trust between them deepened with each conversation, built on her apparent recognition of qualities in him that others seemed to overlook or take for granted. In the professional environment of the building, their interactions began to stand out as something unique, not quite personal, not entirely professional, but occupying a space that felt meaningful to both of them. The loyalty he'd always demonstrated through actions was now being celebrated through words, creating a dynamic that fed his need for recognition while appearing completely innocent. These moments became the highlight of his workdays, proof that his approach to service wasn't just effective, but deeply valued by someone who seemed to understand his character. Her conversational skills revealed themselves as sophisticated and purposeful, always steering discussions toward topics that allowed him to share his perspectives, his values, his experiences in ways that made him feel heard and appreciated. She would ask about his philosophy on helping others, his thoughts on what made relationships trustworthy, his observations about human nature gleaned from years of interacting with building residents. Each conversation felt like an exploration of his character, with her playing the role of fascinated student, eager to understand what made him different from other men she'd encountered. The professional boundary that typically existed between staff and residents dissolved gradually, replaced by something that felt like genuine friendship or even mentorship. Her praise wasn't generic or shallow. She would reference specific things he'd said or done, weaving them into observations about his rare heart that made her compliments feel deeply personal and authentic. The ambiente professional that had once felt routine now carried an undercurrent of anticipation and emotional reward that transformed his entire experience of work. The way she positioned herself as someone who could recognize and articulate his worth created a dynamic where he became emotionally invested in maintaining her good opinion. Her visits weren't just social calls. They felt like opportunities to demonstrate the very qualities she claimed to admire, creating a feedback loop where his desire to live up to her praise motivated him to be even more thoughtful and generous in his interactions. The confianza they were building felt mutual and genuine. She trusted him with increasingly personal observations about people and relationships, while he found himself sharing insights and experiences he rarely discussed with anyone. Her ability to make him feel like his perspective mattered, like his character was not just rare but valuable, filled a need he hadn't fully recognized before. The frustration he sometimes felt about being overlooked or underappreciated in his professional role seemed to dissolve in the warmth of her attention and recognition. These conversations became a sanctuary within his workday, a space where he felt truly seen and valued for who he was, rather than just what he could do. But beneath the surface of these seemingly genuine exchanges, a more calculated strategy was unfolding, one designed to create emotional dependency while gathering information that could later be used against him. Her questions about his background, his finances, his dreams and aspirations weren't driven by genuine curiosity, but by a need to map his vulnerabilities and insecurities. The praise she offered was carefully calibrated to make him feel special, while simultaneously highlighting the very qualities that would make his eventual betrayal more devastating. She was building a detailed psychological profile, understanding exactly what words would hurt most when the time came to deploy them. The professional environment that felt increasingly warm and welcoming was actually becoming more dangerous with each interaction, though he remained completely unaware of the trap being constructed around his trust and openness. Her strategy was brilliant in its subtlety, using his genuine good nature against him by making him believe that someone finally saw and appreciated his authentic self. The emotional investment he was developing in these interactions created a vulnerability that extended far beyond their personal dynamic, affecting how he viewed his role and his worth in the professional environment. Her recognition made him feel more confident, more valued, more secure in his position, feelings that would make the eventual betrayal exponentially more painful and damaging. She had identified his core need for authentic appreciation and was systematically exploiting it while appearing to fulfill it. The lealtad he felt toward her grew with each conversation, built on what seemed like mutual respect and genuine connection. The aprendizado that would eventually emerge from this experience would center on recognizing how manipulation often disguises itself as appreciation, and how the people who praise us most eloquently may be the ones studying us most carefully. The trahison that was being orchestrated would succeed, not because he was naive, but because she had made him believe that someone finally understood and valued his authentic character. Her praise of his rare heart became a powerful tool for emotional manipulation, creating a narrative where he was special, different, and worthy of recognition that others had failed to give him. Each conversation reinforced this story, making him more invested in maintaining the connection and more vulnerable to the devastation that would follow when her true feelings were revealed. The professional relationship that had felt so rewarding and meaningful was actually a carefully constructed illusion, designed to gain access to his emotional world and exploit his fundamental goodness. The trust he placed in her words and intentions would become the weapon she would eventually use to wound him most deeply. The disappointment and superação that would follow would teach him invaluable lessons about the difference between genuine appreciation and strategic manipulation, transforming his approach to both professional relationships and personal boundaries in ways that would ultimately make him stronger and more discerning. The pattern of her visits and the consistency of her praise created a false sense of security and validation that made him increasingly vulnerable to the betrayal that was being carefully orchestrated. Her ability to make him feel seen and valued was real, but her motivations for doing so were entirely self-serving, designed to position herself advantageously while gathering ammunition for future use. The ambiente professional that had become charged with positive emotion and mutual respect was actually a stage where a much darker drama was being prepared, with him as the unwitting target of sophisticated psychological manipulation that would soon reveal its true nature in the most painful way possible. Topic 4. On the third day, while they were talking in the lobby, a friend of hers passed by and made a joke about him. She laughed and replied, "Oh, him? He's a sweetheart. Just lacks money, right?" The moment arrived with the casual cruelty that makes workplace betrayal so devastating, not through dramatic confrontation, but through the careless weaponization of intimate knowledge shared in trust. Her friend's appearance in the lobby seemed coincidental, just another resident passing through during what had become their regular conversation time. The joke that followed felt rehearsed, as if this encounter had been orchestrated to test the very foundation of the relationship they'd been building over the previous days. When she laughed, not the polite chuckle of someone caught off guard, but the genuine amusement of someone enjoying a shared perspective, the sound carried a cruelty that cut through every compliment she'd previously offered. Her response revealed the calculated nature of everything that had come before. The praise, the attention, the apparent appreciation for his rare heart had all been performance, designed to gain information she could later use to diminish him. The professional environment that had felt increasingly warm and welcoming suddenly became a stage for public humiliation, with him as the unwitting target of a joke that reduced his worth to his financial status. The words, "He's a sweetheart, just lacks money," revealed the sophisticated nature of her manipulation, acknowledging his positive qualities while simultaneously dismissing them as insufficient for any real consideration. This wasn't random cruelty. It was strategic demolition of his character, using the very trust he'd placed in her to construct the weapon that would wound him most deeply. The confianza they'd built over their conversations became the foundation for her betrayal, as she demonstrated that every moment of apparent connection had been catalogued and weaponized. Her friend's laughter joined hers in a chorus of dismissal that transformed the lobby from a place of professional pride into a theater of humiliation. The loyalty he'd shown through his actions, the genuine care he'd demonstrated, the authentic character she'd claimed to admire, all of it was reduced to entertainment value, dismissed as irrelevant because it wasn't accompanied by wealth. The ambiente professional that had felt like a sanctuary now felt like a trap, with him as the subject of a joke he'd unknowingly been setting up for days. The calculated timing of this betrayal revealed the level of planning that had gone into his emotional manipulation. She had waited until he was most invested in her opinion, most vulnerable to her assessment of his worth, before revealing her true feelings. The frustration he felt wasn't just about being insulted. It was about recognizing how thoroughly he'd been deceived by someone who had seemed to understand and value his authentic self. Every conversation they'd shared now took on a different meaning, transformed from genuine connection to data gathering for eventual use against him. Her ability to shift seamlessly from private praise to public ridicule demonstrated a level of emotional calculation that spoke to sophisticated manipulation skills rather than momentary poor judgment. The praise she'd offered for his rare heart was revealed as hollow performance, designed to make this moment of dismissal even more devastating. The professional relationship that had felt like mutual respect was exposed as one-sided exploitation, with her using his genuine nature to gather ammunition for social entertainment at his expense. The social dynamics at play revealed how workplace betrayal often operates through the weaponization of vulnerability and the transformation of intimate knowledge into public humiliation. Her friend's presence wasn't coincidental. It was necessary for the full impact of the betrayal, providing an audience that transformed private cruelty into public spectacle. The way she delivered the cutting remark with such casual ease suggested this wasn't spontaneous but planned, part of a larger pattern of behavior, where she used emotional manipulation to gather information that could later be deployed for entertainment or social positioning. The trust he'd placed in her ability to see and appreciate his character became the very foundation of her ability to wound him so deeply. The lealtad he'd demonstrated through consistent action was dismissed as meaningless in the face of financial limitations, revealing her value system as entirely transactional, despite all her previous praise for his authentic character. This moment crystallized a fundamental truth about certain types of people in professional environments. They will cultivate trust specifically to have something valuable to betray when it serves their purposes. The psychological impact of hearing his worth reduced to a financial equation while being discussed as entertainment created a wound that went far deeper than simple insult or criticism. The deception he experienced wasn't just about her cruel words. It was about recognizing how completely he'd misread her character and intentions throughout their interactions. Every compliment she'd given him was now revealed as strategic manipulation, designed to make him more invested in her opinion and more vulnerable to exactly this type of dismissal. The ambiente professional that had felt increasingly positive and rewarding was transformed into a place where his genuine nature had been studied, cataloged, and weaponized against him. Her ability to praise his character while simultaneously dismissing his worth demonstrated a level of emotional sophistication that made the betrayal feel even more calculating and cruel. The aprendizado embedded in this experience would center on recognizing how some people cultivate trust specifically to have something meaningful to betray, using genuine appreciation as bait for more sophisticated forms of manipulation. His response in that moment, the careful control, the measured reaction, the choice to process rather than immediately confront, revealed character strength that her cruelty had been designed to test and undermine. The way he absorbed the blow while maintaining his dignity showed that her assessment of him as financially lacking but characteristically strong was accurate, though she had weaponized this information rather than respecting it. The professional environment that had been the stage for his humiliation would also become the setting for his demonstration of true strength, not through retaliation or dramatic response, but through the quiet dignity of someone who understood that her cruelty revealed more about her character than his worth. The trust he'd placed in her words and intentions had been betrayed, but his response would demonstrate that his actual character was far more resilient than her manipulation had anticipated. The trahison she had orchestrated would ultimately backfire, revealing her own shallow nature while highlighting his genuine strength to everyone who witnessed both the betrayal and his response to it. The ripple effects of this moment would extend far beyond their personal interaction, affecting how others in the building viewed both of them and demonstrating how workplace betrayal often reveals character on multiple levels. Her casual cruelty and his dignified response would become a case study in how people reveal their true nature under pressure, with the professional environment serving as a stage where authentic character either emerges or crumbles under scrutiny. The power of silence in the face of betrayal often carries more weight than any verbal response could achieve, and his measured reaction demonstrated a level of professional maturity that transformed humiliation into dignity. Every word of their cruel exchange had reached him with crystal clarity, each syllable registering not just as personal insult, but as revelation of character, both theirs and, more importantly, his own. The choice to close the gate calmly rather than storm away or immediately confront them showed the kind of emotional intelligence that comes from years of professional experience dealing with difficult people and situations. His return to the bench wasn't retreat. It was strategic positioning, creating physical and emotional space to process what had just occurred while maintaining his professional responsibilities. The confianza he'd placed in her words and apparent appreciation was shattered, but his response revealed that his core strength, his ability to maintain dignity under pressure, remained intact. The ambiente professional that had become a stage for his humiliation was now witnessing something far more powerful, a demonstration of how genuine character responds to betrayal with grace rather than retaliation. The internal processing that occurred during those moments of silence was likely more intense than any external reaction could have conveyed, as he absorbed not just the cruelty of her words, but the calculated nature of the entire manipulation. The frustration he felt wasn't just about being insulted. It was about recognizing how thoroughly his trust had been exploited, how his genuine appreciation for her apparent understanding had been used as ammunition against him. His calm exterior masked the profound disappointment of realizing that someone he'd begun to respect and value had viewed him as entertainment rather than as a person worthy of basic consideration. The loyalty he'd shown through consistent action had been met with casual dismissal, revealing a character assessment that cut far deeper than simple financial criticism. The professional environment that had felt increasingly warm and welcoming was now revealed as a hunting ground, where his authentic nature had been studied and weaponized. Yet his response, maintaining composure while creating space for reflection, demonstrated that her betrayal had revealed more about her limitations than his. The strategic wisdom of his silence became apparent as he recognized that immediate confrontation would only provide more entertainment for people who had already demonstrated their capacity for cruelty. His years of professional experience had taught him that some situations require processing before responding, that emotional reactions in the moment often serve the aggressor's purposes more than the victim's dignity. The trust he'd built in his own judgment was shaken, but his fundamental understanding of appropriate professional behavior remained solid, guiding him toward a response that preserved his integrity while denying them the satisfaction of seeing him lose control. The bench where he positioned himself became both physical anchor and symbolic statement. He wasn't running from the situation, but he also wasn't allowing himself to be drawn into their level of casual cruelty. This moment of quiet strength would prove more powerful than any verbal defense could have been, creating space for others to witness the stark contrast between their behavior and his character. The psychological complexity of absorbing betrayal while maintaining professional composure created a crucible moment that would define how he moved forward in this environment and others. The apprendizado embedded in this experience centered on recognizing that some people reveal their true character through how they treat others when they believe there are no consequences, while others reveal theirs through how they respond to unexpected cruelty. His choice to process rather than react immediately showed emotional maturity that her manipulation had not anticipated or prepared for. The trahison she had orchestrated was designed to diminish him, but his response began the process of elevating him in the eyes of anyone who understood the difference between authentic strength and performative cruelty. The professional environment that had been used as a stage for his humiliation was being transformed into a platform for demonstrating genuine character under pressure. The silence he chose wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of a more powerful response that would unfold over time, rather than exploding in the moment. His calm return to the bench after closing the gate sent a message that resonated far beyond the immediate situation. He understood his worth wasn't determined by others' opinions, especially those who had proven themselves untrustworthy and cruel. The disappointment he felt was real and valid, but his response showed that he wouldn't allow their assessment to become his reality, or their entertainment to become his destruction. The professional dignity he maintained in that moment began the process of reclaiming power in a situation designed to make him feel powerless and diminished. His silence created space for reflection, for planning, for choosing a response that would serve his long-term interests, rather than providing immediate emotional release. The confianza he'd lost in her would be replaced by deeper trust in his own ability to handle difficult people and situations with grace and wisdom. The environment that had felt unsafe due to betrayal was being reclaimed through his demonstration of unshakable personal standards and professional integrity. The ripple effects of his measured response began immediately, as others in the building who witnessed or heard about the exchange would have the opportunity to observe how he handled betrayal versus how she had chosen to inflict it. His silence in that moment wasn't about accepting her assessment. It was about refusing to validate her cruel entertainment with the emotional reaction she had been seeking. The professional environment that had been used to diminish him was already beginning to showcase his actual character, not the financial limitations she had mocked, but the emotional strength and dignity that money cannot buy and cruelty cannot destroy. The super-assume that would follow this moment was already beginning in his choice to respond with wisdom rather than emotion, setting the stage for a transformation that would ultimately prove her assessment of his worth to be as shallow as her character had revealed itself to be. The bench where he sat became a symbol of groundedness and self-possession, a physical manifestation of his refusal to be swept away by others' cruelty or to abandon his post due to personal humiliation. His professional responsibilities continued despite the personal attack, demonstrating the kind of character strength that builds lasting respect and success over time, regardless of immediate financial status or others' limited understanding of true worth. The attempt at reconciliation revealed the shallow understanding some people have of the wounds they inflict, treating calculated cruelty as if it were accidental mishap requiring only casual explanation to resolve. Her approach demonstrated a fundamental misreading of both the situation and his character. She seemed to believe that dismissing her betrayal as humor would somehow erase the trust she had systematically built and then destroyed. The timing of her explanation attempt showed strategic calculation rather than genuine remorse. She likely realized that burning bridges with building staff could have practical consequences, or perhaps recognized that her cruel performance hadn't generated the social approval she'd expected. The professional environment that had been the stage for her betrayal now became the setting for her damage control. But her approach revealed that she still didn't understand the depth of what she had done, or the character of the person she had wronged. The confianza she had spent days cultivating, and then casually destroyed, couldn't be rebuilt through dismissive explanations that minimized the impact of her actions. Her inability to offer genuine accountability would only deepen the lesson about her true character and values. His response carried the weight of someone who had processed not just her words, but the entire pattern of manipulation that had led to this moment, demonstrating wisdom that comes from understanding the difference between genuine mistakes and calculated cruelty. The precision of his reply, contrasting his voluntary kindness to her mother with his involuntary exposure to her cruelty, revealed someone who understood exactly what had transpired and refused to pretend otherwise. His words carried no anger or vindictiveness, but they established a clear boundary that acknowledged the fundamental difference between actions chosen and situations imposed. The loyalty he had demonstrated through helping her mother was presented not as something that earned him immunity from criticism, but as evidence of character that made her casual cruelty particularly revealing of her own values. The ambiente professional that had witnessed her betrayal now heard his clear, measured response that refused to accept her minimization of the harm she had caused. This wasn't about holding grudges. It was about maintaining clarity about what had actually occurred, and refusing to participate in the fiction that cruel intentions could be erased through casual explanations. The sophistication of his response revealed someone who understood that accountability requires acknowledgement of impact, not just intent, and that her attempt to reframe calculated cruelty as innocent humor was itself another form of manipulation. The frustration he felt wasn't just about being insulted. It was about her continued refusal to engage honestly with what she had done, instead attempting to gaslight him into believing that his hurt was unreasonable, given her claimed intentions. His reply demonstrated that he understood the difference between helping someone because you choose to serve versus being subjected to humiliation because someone else chooses to entertain themselves at your expense. The professional relationship that had been built on apparent mutual respect was now revealed as one-sided exploitation, with her using his genuine character to create opportunities for her own amusement and social positioning. The aprendizado embedded in this exchange centered on recognizing that people who truly understand the impact of their actions don't minimize them afterward. They acknowledge them and take responsibility for the harm caused. Her attempt to reframe the betrayal as mere humor revealed a deeper character flaw: the inability to take responsibility for the impact of her actions on others, particularly those she viewed as beneath her social or economic status. The way she approached the explanation showed that she expected him to accept her assessment of the situation over his own experience of being hurt and humiliated by someone he had trusted. This secondary betrayal, the refusal to acknowledge the legitimate impact of her cruelty, often proves more damaging than the original offense because it demonstrates a fundamental lack of empathy and respect for others' dignity. The trust that had been broken couldn't be repaired through explanations that minimized rather than acknowledged the harm caused, especially when those explanations were designed more to absolve her of responsibility than to genuinely address his experience. The professional environment that should have been safe space for respectful interaction had been violated by her cruelty, and her follow-up attempt to minimize that violation only deepened the offense. His refusal to accept her casual dismissal of the harm she had caused established a new dynamic where she could no longer treat him as someone whose feelings and dignity were irrelevant to her actions. The deception he experienced in this follow-up interaction was perhaps even greater than the original betrayal, as it revealed that she felt entitled not only to hurt him, but to dictate how he should feel about being hurt. His response demonstrated that authentic character includes the wisdom to refuse gaslighting attempts and the strength to maintain clarity about one's own experience even when others attempt to redefine it. The professional dignity he maintained throughout this exchange showed that her assessment of him as financially lacking but characteristically strong was accurate, though she had chosen to weaponize rather than respect that strength. The environment that had been used to diminish him was now witnessing his refusal to be diminished, setting the stage for a transformation that would ultimately elevate him, while revealing the limitations of her own character and worldview. The contrast between her casual approach to causing harm and his thoughtful response to receiving it created a clear demonstration of the difference between authentic character and superficial social performance. The trahison she had orchestrated was designed to establish her superiority, but her inability to handle his dignified response revealed the shallow foundation of that perceived superiority. The professional environment that had been the stage for their interaction became a classroom where others could observe the difference between someone who uses trust to harm others and someone who maintains integrity even when trust is betrayed. His response transformed what she intended as his humiliation into her revelation, showing that true strength lies not in the ability to wound others, but in the wisdom to maintain dignity when wounded by others. The superassumption that would follow from this exchange was already evident in his refusal to accept her minimization of the harm caused, demonstrating that healing from betrayal begins with maintaining clarity about what actually occurred, rather than accepting others' attempts to rewrite the narrative in ways that absolve them of responsibility for their cruelty. Topic 7. In the building, the story spread. Other residents began to treat him with even more respect. The organic spread of this story throughout the building revealed how authentic character resonates with people who understand the difference between genuine dignity and performative behavior. Word traveled not through gossip or malicious intent, but through the natural human tendency to recognize and discuss moments when someone demonstrates exceptional grace under pressure. Residents who witnessed the exchange, or heard about it from others, found themselves re-evaluating their own interactions with him through this new lens of understanding about his character. The professional environment that had been the stage for intended humiliation became the foundation for elevated respect, as people recognized that his measured response revealed strength rather than weakness. The confianza that had been damaged in one relationship was being rebuilt exponentially in dozens of others, as residents understood that someone who maintains dignity when betrayed can be trusted to handle their own concerns and needs with equal integrity. His refusal to retaliate or engage in petty behavior demonstrated the kind of emotional maturity that building communities desperately need in their service providers. The ambiente professional was transformed from a place where he had been dismissed to one where his character was celebrated and respected. The shift in how residents treated him wasn't driven by pity or sympathy, but by genuine recognition of qualities they had previously taken for granted or failed to notice. His years of consistent service were now viewed through the context of someone who maintained professional standards even when personally attacked, elevating every previous interaction they'd had with him to a new level of appreciation. The loyalty he had always demonstrated was now understood as authentic character, rather than mere job performance, creating a deeper foundation for mutual respect and trust. Residents began to see him not just as helpful staff, but as someone whose judgment and character could be relied upon in more complex situations. The frustration that might have been expected after such public humiliation was replaced by validation from people whose opinions mattered more than those who had betrayed him. The professional relationships that had been cordial became warm, built on shared understanding of what constitutes genuine character versus superficial social performance. This transformation demonstrated that authentic strength creates its own rewards, often in ways and from sources that couldn't have been anticipated or orchestrated. The story's circulation became a case study in how workplace dynamics shift when people witness authentic character under pressure, revealing the difference between those who understand true worth and those who measure value through shallow metrics. Residents who had their own experiences with the daughter and her friend found new context for understanding those interactions, recognizing patterns of behavior that they hadn't previously identified or acknowledged. The trust he had built through consistent action was now reinforced by his demonstration of grace under pressure, creating a compound effect that elevated his standing throughout the building community. His refusal to use the situation for sympathy or dramatic effect showed emotional intelligence that residents found both refreshing and reassuring in someone who had access to their homes and personal spaces. The professional environment that should have been safe from personal attack was now understood by residents as requiring their protection and respect for someone who had proven himself worthy of both. The aprendizado embedded in this transformation showed how authentic character creates its own vindication, often through channels and sources that those who attack it could never anticipate or control. The elevated respect he received wasn't performative or temporary, but reflected a genuine shift in how people understood his worth and character, based on observable evidence rather than assumptions or social positioning. The way he handled betrayal became a template for how residents hoped they would respond to similar situations, creating a model of dignity that inspired others rather than seeking their pity or support. His approach to the entire situation demonstrated that true strength lies not in avoiding difficult people or situations, but in maintaining integrity regardless of how others choose to behave. The professional relationships that had been built on mutual courtesy were now founded on mutual respect, with residents recognizing that someone who maintains dignity when betrayed will certainly maintain confidentiality, reliability, and integrity in their service. The building community that had been the setting for his humiliation became the foundation for his elevation, proving that authentic character eventually finds its proper recognition and reward, often in ways that are more meaningful and lasting than what was initially lost through betrayal. The contrast between how she was now viewed versus how he was perceived created a powerful lesson about the long-term consequences of character choices, demonstrating that cruelty diminishes the perpetrator while dignity elevates the target. Residents who had witnessed or heard about the exchange found themselves naturally gravitating toward someone who had proven his character under pressure, while distancing themselves from someone who had revealed her willingness to use trust as a weapon for entertainment. The deception that might have been expected from such betrayal was replaced by the satisfaction of seeing authentic character recognized and rewarded by people whose judgment and respect actually mattered. The professional environment that had been used to attempt his diminishment became the stage for his vindication, showing that truth and character have their own momentum that cannot be suppressed or redirected by those who choose cruelty over kindness. The transformation in how he was treated demonstrated that while we cannot control how others choose to behave toward us, we can control how we respond, and that response often determines how the larger community ultimately views and treats us. The superasson evidenced in this shift was not about recovering from betrayal, but about transcending it through the natural consequences of maintaining dignity and integrity, regardless of how others choose to behave. The trust that had been broken by one person was rebuilt exponentially by many, creating a foundation for professional success and personal satisfaction that was far stronger than what had existed before the betrayal occurred. The ambiente professional was now characterized by genuine respect and appreciation rather than mere courtesy, proving that authentic character creates its own rewards, and that betrayal often serves to highlight and elevate the very qualities it was intended to diminish. The building community's response became a masterclass in how authentic character is ultimately recognized and rewarded, regardless of temporary setbacks or cruel intentions from those who lack the wisdom to appreciate genuine worth when they encounter it. The transformation from doorman to building superintendent represented more than professional advancement. It demonstrated how authentic character, when tested by betrayal, often emerges stronger and more focused than before. His elevation wasn't driven by revenge or spite, but by the clarity that comes from understanding one's true worth, regardless of others' limited ability to recognize it. The residents who had witnessed his grace under pressure became his strongest advocates, recognizing that someone who maintains integrity when personally attacked would certainly handle building management responsibilities with equal character and professionalism. The confianza that had been shattered by one person's cruelty was rebuilt exponentially through the support of those who understood the difference between genuine character and superficial social performance. His new position wasn't just a job upgrade. It was community recognition of leadership qualities that had been demonstrated through his response to betrayal rather than his reaction to praise. The professional environment that had been the stage for his humiliation became the foundation for his elevation, proving that authentic strength creates its own opportunities for advancement and success. The decision to open his own maintenance company showed entrepreneurial wisdom, born from understanding that character-based service creates its own market demand among people who value integrity over convenience. Residents who had observed his professional approach and personal dignity became his first clients, choosing to support someone whose character they had witnessed under pressure, rather than hiring unknown service providers based solely on price or convenience. The loyalty he had always demonstrated through consistent action was now being rewarded through business relationships built on mutual respect and proven reliability. His company's success wasn't just about technical skills or competitive pricing. It was about the trust that comes from knowing someone's character has been tested and proven in real-world situations. The ambiente professional that had once been limited to building employment expanded into entrepreneurial opportunity, driven by relationships formed through authentic character rather than marketing strategies or social connections. The frustration that might have been expected from betrayal was transformed into motivation for building something better, proving that authentic character creates its own path to success when given proper foundation and support. The irony of her eventual request for favors revealed the short-sightedness of those who measure worth through shallow metrics, while failing to recognize genuine character and potential. Her approach to him after his professional advancement likely carried the same entitled assumption that had characterized their previous interactions, that his helpful nature would override any memory of her cruelty once she needed something from him. The request itself demonstrated her inability to learn from experience or understand the long-term consequences of treating others poorly based on temporary circumstances or perceived social positioning. The professional dynamics that had once favored her due to resident status versus staff hierarchy were now reversed, with him holding both authority and business independence that she could no longer dismiss or take for granted. Her need for his services created the perfect opportunity to demonstrate how character-based business relationships operate differently from those built on convenience or assumption. The apprendizado embedded in this moment centered on understanding that people often reveal their true priorities when they need something from those they have previously dismissed or mistreated. His response carried the weight of someone who had learned to value his own worth and charge accordingly, both financially and emotionally, transforming the painful lesson of betrayal into the wisdom of appropriate boundaries. The phrase "even for returned dignity" wasn't vindictive. It was educational, helping her understand that actions have consequences and that professional relationships require mutual respect to function effectively. His pricing structure now reflected not just market rates for services, but compensation for the emotional labor required to work with people who had proven themselves untrustworthy or disrespectful. The trust that had been broken couldn't be rebuilt through simple requests for favors. It would require acknowledgement of harm caused and demonstrated change in behavior over time. The professional environment that had been characterized by her entitled expectations was now governed by his standards for respectful business relationships. The trahison she had orchestrated months earlier was now being addressed through professional boundaries that protected his dignity, while offering her the opportunity to learn about treating service providers with appropriate respect. The business success that followed his elevation demonstrated how character-based service creates sustainable competitive advantages that cannot be replicated through marketing or price competition alone. Clients who had witnessed his integrity under pressure became loyal customers who valued reliability and trustworthiness over convenience or cost savings. His company's reputation was built on the foundation of character that had been tested and proven in the building community, creating word-of-mouth referrals based on demonstrated values rather than claimed capabilities. The deception that had resulted from trusting the wrong person was transformed into discernment about which relationships were worth cultivating and which were purely transactional. The professional relationships he now maintained were characterized by mutual respect and clear boundaries, protecting both his emotional well-being and business interests from those who might attempt to exploit his helpful nature. The environment that had once felt unsafe due to betrayal was now secure through his position of authority and independence, proving that authentic character eventually creates its own protection and advancement opportunities. The contrast between his current success and her need for favors created a powerful demonstration of how character choices compound over time, with authentic integrity building lasting value, while shallow cruelty creates isolation and need. His willingness to provide services at professional rates rather than personal favors showed that forgiveness doesn't require returning to previous dynamics that enabled disrespectful treatment. The superasson evidenced in his transformation was complete, from someone whose kindness was taken for granted to someone whose character commanded respect and appropriate compensation. The building community that had witnessed both her betrayal and his response now observed the long-term consequences of those character choices, creating a lasting lesson about the importance of treating others with dignity, regardless of perceived social or economic differences. The professional environment that had been used to attempt his diminishment became the stage for his vindication and success, proving that authentic character creates its own rewards, while cruelty creates its own limitations and consequences. Subscribe to this channel and activate notifications so you can continue learning these crucial patterns of workplace psychology. The next video will reveal even more sophisticated manipulation tactics that most people never recognize until it's too late. Your professional survival and success depend on staying ahead of those who would exploit your authentic nature for their entertainment or advancement.